entrepreneurs of the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a platform to help athletes to network and connect and monetize their fame. This show is all about athletes transition out of sports, which is a major issue today. And we interview former collegiate professional athletes, and we talk about their transition journey out of sports into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. So excited today to have with us Taylor Cook. How you doing, Taylor?
Good. Thanks so much for inviting me to be here today, Rob. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. So Taylor was a hockey player. She played at St. Thomas University in Canada. And then ultimately, when she was done in college, she played some professional hockey in Norway. And then after that, other things too as well, obviously. But she started her company, Tailored Minds. She's a mental performance coach, and she has some new exciting projects she's working on, which she's going to share with us a little bit later on. So Taylor, talk about growing up playing sports and how that shaped you ultimately leading up into college.
I think sports played one of the most major roles in my life. Honestly, I can't remember a time where I wasn't really active, let's say. I think for hockey players, especially if you played from a young age, the ongoing joke is kind of like you've come out with skates on your feet. Pretty much how it was for me. My dad played hockey, and it was actually my mom's decision to put me in and play. And basically the second that I started is when I fell in love. And yeah, I just wanted to continue playing. And that's all I ever really dreamed of. It was, never really the standard kind of responses when you ask kids, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Not a rock star, not a princess or anything like that. I just wanted to be a hockey player. So.
Yeah, I always like to ask that question too. You dream about being a professional athlete, and obviously you just hit it up there. I mean, for me, I always joke around. I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, which was true, but I didn't have the talent, so now I do podcasts. And then, talk a little bit about the athlete skill set and kind of how that plays into things, especially once you were playing in college, and then ultimately things that you do today.
Yeah, I honestly think we have to kind of start a little bit before college, because I'm finding, especially in hockey, there's a lot of younger athletes that are specializing a lot earlier on, and they think that it's going to help them kind of get ahead of the curve, which studies show that it's not actually the case. There's actually a higher risk of injury and actually decreasing the longevity of your career when you specialize early. So for me, when I was younger, I was playing all the sports. So I was playing hockey as my main and primary, but through elementary and high school, I had other things and activities that I was doing outside of that allowed me to develop my athletic skills in a different capacity. So I think that's really what allowed me to push my career a little bit further than some other people perhaps. But yeah, I mean, once I got to university, it was quite intense. We're on the ice 6 days a week out of 7. And all of a sudden you're going from, being in high school where they're kind of lax with your academics and you're still really focused on the athletic side of things. And then getting into university, and all of a sudden it's like, you can't be late for anything. You have to have your things in on time. If not, a lot of the time the teachers don't really care. So it was kind of like a rude awakening in my first year. So it was definitely a big learning curve. But at the end of the day, it wasn't just the physical side of the game that was important. It was also the mental and the things that you're doing outside that are helping you to stay organized and on track.
Yeah, no, I absolutely certainly see that across, any sport. You're right. And I imagine, when I talk to I've talked to hockey players and, even like ice skaters or swimmers, and you tend to have to get, to the arena very early, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's just, it seems like a lot of times it's that early morning practice, right? To get in there beforehand, before everybody else gets all later on.
We were actually pretty lucky in the sense that we didn't really have very many morning practices. Ours were kind of late afternoon, early evening.
Okay.
So we had our own rink. So like I said, we're super lucky with our school because we had our own rink. We got the first pick on the ice times for the most part. So yeah, we had the same schedule pretty much every day of the week. So it was kind of more difficult finding the classes that we could fit into that schedule and kind of work around being on the ice. But,
right.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, it seems like definitely education was important, for the fact that, it seems like the teachers really, wanted to make sure you're getting that education aside from just the sport. And I guess, I don't know if that's like sports specific, or just in general, might have been like philosophy of your university. 'Cause I mean, you think about it, sometimes you hear these stories, but just they don't have time for like, some of these maybe like Division I football programs in the US. I'm not really sure how that works. I mean, do you think it's different where you're at, or was it sport related, or just maybe your school was better at that?
I think it's kind of tough to say. I mean, I don't want to say that it's different between men's and women's sports necessarily, but in my experience, I've found that women need to care about their education because they haven't had the professional opportunities to play up until very recently. So
Right.
you're going through and you're basically just having the opportunity to continue playing your sport for an extra 4 or 5 years, depending on where you go. But now it's a completely different story. So there is the opportunity to go and play professionally in the new PWHL league in North America, which is really great. And I'm super, super happy that that's a possibility. And we're seeing the WNBA is also growing quite a bit, and same with women's soccer and in so many other women's leagues, which is great to see. But when I was in school, that didn't really exist. Like I
Right.
received an offer to go and play in the PHF before it was taken over by the PW. And I was like just astounded at the offer that I received because it was so minimal. But that
Right.
was what most people expected when they were going to play in that league at that time. So I think now it'll definitely start to shift. Maybe we'll start to see more female athletes in the university space not caring so much about the academic side necessarily because
Right.
they are so focused on becoming a pro. But this is just like my own opinion, right? It's not fact by any means.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot of my other guests too. I think it is sports specific. Even like with me, like I was a runner in college. Yeah, I ran track and cross country. I got hurt my sophomore year, but for me, at least when I was going to school, and I wasn't an elite runner. I mean, it wasn't going to be in the Olympics or anything like that. So, I knew my path was going to be, what's after school, and what I'm going to be doing, and kind of having that game plan for my transition out. Whereas, and then to your point with the female athletes, I mean, now especially, I mean, it's obviously the big name everybody talks about is Caitlin Clark, and kind of the what she's doing and getting the WNBA, and just I'm sure there's a lot of predecessors that basically paved the way, but that's the name that comes out prominent now just because it's going on. So let's talk about with the transition out of sports. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's such a major issue today. Athletes struggling, they lose their identity. They think of themselves as the player, not the person. When you were at school, was there education? I don't mean just like a one-day workshop, but was there education to help athletes either when they were done playing college or even as an alumni athlete?
To my recollection, I have to say no. Maybe there was something and I just was unaware of the offering at the time. But I've now been graduated from university now for 5 years. And most of the things that I see come through our alumni are related to like, discounts that you can get with specific companies that they're
Right.
partnered with, or, always trying to promote alumni weekend whenever we have those. Usually from our school, it's usually in January. But other than that, like I haven't really utilized any sort of alumni network from school, and definitely didn't have any sort of like transitioning out of the game type of, not even like a workshop. Like we didn't,
Right.
I was not aware of any of those things at the time. And so it wasn't until, I'd kind of gone through my knee injury and the surgery, rehabbing, and then going and starting to play in Kazakhstan, the physical demand of being the only goalie for that team and having such a heavy like physical load, I knew after the first half of the season, like there's no way that was going to be a sustainable route for me. And I could already feel it weighing on me physically, mentally, and emotionally, because I was also holding down a job outside of playing because salary wasn't paying
Right.
what I needed to actually live. Right. And so that's, for me at least, what prompted me to make the decision. Okay, like it's going to be time to make the switch now. And I'm really lucky that I got to make that choice for myself, whereas a lot of other athletes don't have that opportunity. And that's why it can make it even harder to transition from the game, because it's so sudden and abrupt and unexpected.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's you were fortunate to kind of have that foresight that, some of these athletes don't have, especially like, I mean, like injuries take away pretty quickly, obviously. And, I think a lot of people too, they're looking like, oh, I'm going to be a professional athlete. And not too many people make, I think it's like 1/10% or something like that. But I think that it's important with the learning, kind of next steps. I mean, I think schools are making more of an effort now, but there's still a lot that can be done. And that's like one of the things that we talk about at Alumni Direct is we talk about kind of going in to potentially going to athletic departments at schools and with a group of resource partners, and not only just not only helping the current athletes, but also like the alumni athletes as well, that obviously they might be out 1 year, 2 year, 5 years that are still struggling. And there's a lot of people out there trying to do that. So you kind of tapped a little bit into alumni engagement, and it's more about, I guess, like you said, that maybe this different discounts and things like that. Has the hockey program ever kind of reached out to you, to come back, or any of the other sports that of reaching out to their alumni athletes to kind of come back and help the players, not just like a golf tournament, but more about like, being involved with them?
Honestly, I think that our alumni association does. They also know that I'm living on the other side of the world, though.
Right.
So I feel like maybe I'm not the one getting these specific invitations. But for every time that we have our alumni weekend for hockey, everybody who's ever been a Tommy or played at the school that I played at, we always get the email saying like, this is when it is. I
Right.
think we usually do get like discounts on like place to stay or whatever, that kind of stuff. But we also, in my graduating year, had quite a few gals decide that they were gonna like continue living in that city. So most of us came from Ontario or other provinces besides New Brunswick. But now quite a few of them have stayed. And from my understanding, they're in coaching or they're doing something in the community that's giving back and helping to, to grow the program and just give back to women's hockey. So, yeah.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, I've had conversations with my own school of just, athletes coming back to mentor. Cause I mean, there's people want to give back. They want to help. And it's a two-way street, because obviously the athlete needs to want to come back as well. But I think there needs to be more engagement that way, because I think it can make a very positive impact, especially on the ones that have graduated too, because I think they tend to get forgotten unless you're some star athlete. So it makes a big difference. So one of the things I've done on my I keep saying 15 to 20, could be more than that now, but I'd like to ask this question, or two sets of questions here. The first one is, what advice, if you can go back, would you give to freshman Taylor?
That's a great question. To freshman Taylor, accountability is the most important thing, not just to your team, but to yourself. I think that's definitely like the biggest learning that I had in my first year, which I didn't get until the very end of the season during our exit meeting with coach. But if I could go back, that's definitely one thing that I would love to tell myself, is like, nobody's going to take care of you. You can't be pointing the blame finger at somebody else. Like, you got to point it at yourself, and you have to take responsibility for everything that's going on, no matter what. And the second that you do is, the moment that you realize that I'm in control of my own destiny. And if I want to get to a certain position or reach a certain goal, then that's going to fall on me at the end of the day. And I can't expect anybody else to be doing that.
Yeah, that's good. Now we'll fast forward to what advice would you give to senior Taylor?
I don't think I've ever thought about this one before, actually. To senior Taylor. Okay, so I can kind of share a little bit of a story for some background content here. So when I graduated from school, I had already applied to the draft for the CW at the time. So that was the Canadian Women's Hockey League. And 2 months before I graduated, the league completely folded, and there was no kind of opportunity for me to now be going and playing professionally and staying in Canada. There was only leaving the country. And so it just was happenstance that my coach had received an email from somebody within the team from Kazakhstan, and they were looking for a goalie to sign on for 3 years. And basically what they wanted to do was to qualify for the Olympics. They wanted to make the qualification round. So they wanted the goalie to sign a 3-year contract, come play with them for the next 3 years, help them make those qualifications. And so I was in contact with them, and like going back and forth. I was highly under the impression that like, yes, this is happening. I was super excited. all I've ever wanted to do is like play on an Olympic stage, right? And so about 2 weeks before, and like I'd been waiting for them to send me a contract. 2 weeks before I would have been set to go, I got an email saying that like they were going to go with somebody else instead, and that they were just revoking the contract. And then looking back, like you can't just assume that because somebody has said something to you that it's set in stone. So like once you have those contracts, make sure that they're signed and make sure that you actually understand them, because that was like a really heartbreaking situation for me to be in, like losing that contract 2 weeks before I was thinking I was going to be going abroad and playing for 3 years. So that was pretty tough. I think if I could give myself some advice when graduating, is like get it in writing, whatever you do.
Yeah, for sure. That's got to be rough. So let's talk about networking, connecting, and I think it's so important. And just kind of get your feedback on, especially while you're still playing.
Networking and connecting, in what capacity are you?
Just connecting with other people, whether it be fellow athletes, whether it be people in businesses, people that that maybe that you can help, that they can help you.
Yeah, so I never really like, in terms of like professional connecting, we'll say like talking LinkedIn, I honestly never had any sort of LinkedIn presence until maybe sometime last year. And it's grown great since then. And I absolutely love using the platform. But if I think back to when I was in university, I wasn't necessarily like networking with other athletes outside of the school, but I was our school's student athlete president for the council and stuff. So I helped put a lot of things together to give back to the community, and I organized some events where athletes would be able to go if they were having like issues getting their homework done, or just like a study hall is kind of what we put together. So athletes had a resource and someone who could be there to help them work through some of those things, because you don't necessarily have the time in classes, or you have to miss a class and those kinds of things. So I feel like when I was in school, it wasn't necessarily like the networking, but it was a connection piece for me. Like I really wanted to make sure that I was making a positive impact, whether that was on the other athletes in the school or on the community as a whole. And the one thing I really loved about the Tommy's program is that they have like this thing called Adopt a Tommy is what it's called. And so when you first go, especially for those that are moving away from home for the first time, and now all of a sudden they're in a completely different place with new people and a whole new phase of life, there's Adopt a Tommy program. Basically, you're given to a family who has young kids, and they come out and they support the games and they invite you over for dinner. So it kind of has like a little bit of a homey feel to it. And you can make really great connections with these families. And it's been, like I said, 5 years since I graduated, and I still am in contact with the family that I was with when I was there, and seeing their like two little girls grow up and getting those messages and seeing like the videos of them playing hockey and all these other things. Like it's so great to have those connections, I think. And yeah, like that's kind of the difference for me, at least, between when I was in school versus now being in a professional place. A lot of it's just like via LinkedIn and seeing, okay, like what kind of impact can we make with the people that we're connecting with there.
Yeah, and you hit it there. I mean, I think a lot of it is about relationships and building relationships. And we talk to people all the time. I mean, you could almost be starting like when you're, young and even in high school, of just, you've got your friends, their parents, there's coaches. I mean, we encourage people to build these relationships, because you never know where they're going to lead, and having that approach of, it's not just, how's it going to help me, but also how can I help others as well? That's building that relationship, because you never know what's going to, happen. I mean, that family is a perfect example. You never know, maybe someone from that family at some point might circle back into your life in a different capacity, in a business capacity, or whatever it might be, or you might be, doing something for them. I mean, you said they played hockey, so kind of mentoring them, guiding them to whatever. So I think it's real important. And, we talk all the time about that. And just one time I talked to, a couple of times, I actually talked to some agents, and they just said, from an athlete perspective, the best time to network and connect is while they're still playing. Is when they're done playing, all of a sudden it's like, they're expecting maybe to get this job, just because they were an athlete. And it doesn't necessarily happen that way, because they hadn't put the time in and built those relationships.
Yeah. And it's tough because I can I can relate, like coming out of university, not having any sort of, let's say, professional work experience, because I only had the summers where I could work. I was busy being a full-time student, full-time athlete, and I didn't really have that much time for a job that was going to really develop skills in the capacity that I needed them to. And so, like, I think that also kind of feeds into the issue of the athlete identity once you've stopped playing the sport, because all of a sudden you feel like you don't have any value anymore. All of a sudden,
Right.
like, you have people telling you it's the best time to make connections is when you're still playing. Yeah, I do think that is certainly important, but I don't think that that's the only nor the best time. I think
Right.
now is the best time to make connections, no matter what age you're at.
Sure.
Doesn't matter. So I think if agents could kind of think about how they can flip that script when they're talking to their players, it would
Right.
also make that transition period so much better, because like you have value no matter what. Just because you stop playing doesn't mean that you're not a valuable or worthwhile person anymore. And a lot of the times, people will retire from their sport and go on and do more amazing things that are impacting the next generation of athletes. So to say that it's like only valuable when you're playing, I think is a little bit misleading. But I can kind of understand where they're coming from at the same time. So,
Yeah, and I don't think it was meant to be only while they're playing, just more about doing it while you're playing. Like, I
mhm,
mean, you need to continue, like you're saying. They weren't saying once they're done not to do it. They were just saying more. It's easier while people still know who you are. That was more the context of it,
for
not as
sure,
far as
for
that
sure.
goes. But yeah, I think it's it's important, to open up those doors and open up the relationships. So let's talk a little bit about your. So ultimately, we kind of went through two transitions in a sense. You had the one transition from being a college hockey player to being a professional hockey player, and then ultimately the transition out of there. So let's talk first about when you were going from college to professional. How did that go? And
Yeah, well, like I said, it was definitely a little touch and go after I graduated with, being in contact with the team from Kazakhstan, losing the contract, then ended up going and coaching in Hungary for 3 months with the U25 team. Interesting experience, lots of learning there. And I think the biggest learning was that I was definitely not ready to be coaching the game. I still missed playing. And luck just happened that there was a team in Oslo in Norway and the professional league there that they were looking for a goalie. So I pretty much made that decision after a weekend. They flew me out and making sure it's a good fit for both and all those things. And yeah, after that it was just moving straight from Hungary over to Norway. And I think the biggest challenge I can say is like not necessarily the playing, but it was adapting to different cultures. For
okay,
me to go from being in an English speaking country, knowing a little bit of French, but definitely not anywhere near fluent, to go to Hungary where the language is like completely different. To learn it is also extremely difficult. Norwegian and Norway is much simpler and much more kind of relevant to English speakers, so it's a lot easier to understand. So that was not so bad. But then, like now being in Germany, it's like okay, now I have to kind of start to relearn another language, and I think just kind of constantly adapting to those languages is definitely was one of like the biggest challenges that I never really foresaw ever, because I never thought about going overseas to play. So
right, right. Yeah, that's interesting because a lot of, if you're just talking to like athletes in whether it be the Canada or US and just staying there and speaking English, the native language, and then all of a sudden go into other countries, and yeah, I could definitely see that being challenges. I mean, it's just a challenge for everybody. I know if I'm going somewhere to like another country, even though as a tourist, you have to learn the language or hope somebody speaks English, that and I mean vice versa when they're coming here. I mean, they're kind of facing the same challenges.
mhm.
So what about so once you so you played professionally? I know we talked about you had some injuries and all that, but talk about once you were done playing. Talk about that transition. And I know you mentioned about kind of already looking at other things, but talk about how that went.
Yeah, I had a little bit of foresight there, so I was kind of like preparing for the second career while I was still playing. But when I actually made the decision to hang it up for good, it was a little bit of a slap in the face. I'm not gonna lie. To be going from super active to like working from home environment where you're a lot of the time sitting and very stagnant, and being in a part of the country where not a lot of people speak English, so it's really difficult to connect with people. And then like being a coach's girlfriend instead of a player's girlfriend, there's some sort of like lines that are drawn in the sand where you don't really get to kind of, interact the same way, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. And so, yeah, I think at first it was like a little bit of a shocking experience, and it took me a really long time. And I'm still like finding my way after all of this. I mean, it's been like a year and a half now since I retired. For like the first year, I maybe went into the gym like a handful of times. Like I didn't really have a desire to be there, I'm not working towards something, So now slowly starting to get back into that space and like, what is it that I want to do next? Because I don't want to just go and work out at the gym. I want to stay competitive and like have fun at the same time and be social. And so, yeah, I think just navigating the energy difference and like the activity level difference for me has been the most challenging part. But otherwise, like stepping in and doing the performance coaching with athletes, I absolutely love it. Continuing on with the podcast, absolutely love it. And like, I love connecting with people and having the conversations that we are now and that we've already had a couple times before this too, So I think for me, it's kind of like a seamless transition in that sense, but still like building a business on your own and having to seek out some mentors and people that you can kind of learn from, like all of those are really, really important. Whereas if I, had just stepped into like a corporate job or being employed somewhere, it would have been obviously much easier, but definitely would not be as fulfilling at the end of the day.
Yeah, and so you kind of segued for me. That was great. Give me like just give a couple of words to athletes. Advice that you give them in that transition, whether it's from college or whether it's from professional.
Trust your gut. That's been rock. It's been the staple for me and all of the decisions that I make. If it feels right, then I will do it. But if I have any sort of hesitancy or if I feel like I'm not really sure, usually it's a no. Yeah. And if you're not in touch with that gut feeling, or maybe it shows up differently for you, but it's like this, sixth sense is like knowing, just trust it.
That's great. It's so funny because like every episode, you get different answers, and you were concise and to the point. That's great. Trust your gut. I like that. Well, let's talk now. So we're going to talk about a couple things. One, you got into mental health performance coaching with TaylorMade Sports, and then we'll talk a little more about your future endeavor or current endeavor that you're going on along the side of that. So talk a little bit about TaylorMade Sports.
Yeah, so it's Tailored Minds actually, but
Tailored Minds. I'm sorry,
TaylorMade Golf. It all makes sense.
That's right. Yeah, but it's good though. You got your name there, right?
Yeah, perfect. It's perfect. Yeah, so like originally, when I retired, I was actually working with a company in Toronto, but there was like not really any support being in Europe. Didn't give me any sort of visas or anything like this, and there was still the same uncertainty as I have now when I'm stepping into building my own business. And so after a while I realized like it doesn't make sense for me to go and work for someone else when I can be doing these things for myself, and I know how to do a lot of those things. So yeah, it was I think last August, so almost a year, that I launched the business, and it's been a slow rolling and burning process, which I appreciate because I think it's allowed me to kind of hone in on my skills as a coach, and also to kind of fall back and make those connections with people and being able to learn from other people, and how is it that I can better develop these certain things and whatnot. So now I'm at a point where hopefully, not hopefully, I will, and I have launched a whole new like rebranded website, which I'm really excited about, and I'm going to be kind of getting into more of like the strategic things to be able to reach the people that I want to be working with, right? So it's a slow work in progress, but slow and steady wins the race, right? So that's the coaching side of the game. But the other thing that I've got in the works at the moment is a women's sports podcasting network. It's still in its very seedling stages, but part of that seedling stage is making the connections with the right people and being able to find the support where you need it. And so, working with others to figure out, okay, like how is it that we're going to be able to make this a success when we launch. It's been really interesting. And now kind of figuring out the whole pathway of, reaching out to investors or VCs or whoever it might be, for partnerships, sponsorships, all those things. So huge learning curve, absolutely. And definitely humbling in the fact that I know I can't do this myself. I might have a vision for it, but I need other people to join me on that journey to make it something that's going to be really positive and impactful for not just women in sports, but to amplify the voices so people can hear those stories and connect with the person that's behind that athlete. And I think that's like the biggest thing for me is always being able to connect with the person. Like you see a lot of stuff. I don't know if I can swear. Sorry. You see a lot of stuff here on social. So like you want to actually get to know like some of those little things that happen behind the scenes that nobody else is really privy to unless you have that one-on-one conversation with someone. And then to be able to just inspire the next generation of young women and young girls to continue on into sports. And how is it that we can make sure that they're not tapering off around the ages of 12 or 13 and deciding that they don't want to play sports anymore because of whatever the reason might be. So, yeah, it's an interesting journey so far, but I love every second of it.
Well, you can tell you're passionate about it. You can see your face definitely lights up with a smile when you're talking about it, which is great. So it's something that you love to do. Is it going to be, it's multiple on different topics?
So the vision that I have for it is that it's definitely going to be covering a multitude of sports, and hopefully we'll be able to cover different levels of those sports as well. So maybe it's not just pro, but we can get into NCAA or youth sports if they have that there. And then also to have a community space, because I think that connection piece, right? Like I always kind of come back to that being connected, having relationships, building a community where listeners are actually going to be able to join this community and potentially connect directly with athletes or directly with those podcast hosts to be able to give their feedback, to connect with other fans and other women that are playing the game. I think having a community like that is something I have never seen before. I've seen like micro communities of, female athletes and stuff, but to have like just one big base where everybody can connect and you can meet people from all around the world that are playing a sport that you love, can't get much better than that.
Yeah, that sounds great. So how do people find you?
Well, you can connect with me pretty much anywhere. I'm most active on Instagram and LinkedIn. So at Taylor B Cook _ on Instagram, or just you can find me at Taylor B Cook on LinkedIn. I have all the socials, but those are the best ones. Or you can reach out directly via the website. We have a contact form there. So yeah.
And what's the website?
www.tailored-minds.com. So TAYLORED-minds.
Great. Yeah, it's old school, and we'll put it in the show notes as well. And you can find us at alumnidirect.com. You can find the podcast on our YouTube channel, as well as across all the podcast networks. And on sportspreneur.com, our friends over there, they've got multiple podcasts. They do a great job, great hosts, and Instagram and all that. But we really want to make an impact and help as many athletes as we can. And I always say at least getting one athlete, but encourage people to share this out across all the different networks and just really listen to every guest that I've had, Taylor included, just gives great advice. And as fellow athletes, we've all gone through some type of a transition out of sport. And for the ones that really struggle, we're here for you. And hopefully listening to some of these different podcasts and these guests will do something. Taylor, again, thank you so much. It's been great.
No, thank you so much. It was really fun to be here.
You're welcome.